Welcome to the HR Off Script. This is the podcast where we will uncover opportunities and talk about conversations that usually happen behind closed doors. We will uncover everything around cost opportunities, business outcomes, and really look at how we lead and build culture in the world of work today, particularly in the Asia Pacific region. Hello, I'm Roop Kaistha. I'm the Regional Managing Director for AMS for Asia Pac. And today in HR Off Script, I am extremely happy to welcome Josh Bersin from the Josh Bersin Company. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Roop. It's great to be here.
Josh doesn't need any introduction, but for completion, I am going to give a very quick one. Josh is a very well-renowned industry analyst, author, educator, and for me it is extremely special also because I'm a big follower of Josh and I wait for the podcast, Josh, that I know how you record them now, but every Sunday that's the podcast that I'm listening to, so really look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Roop.
Josh, I'm just going to dive straight into it, right? You travel the world, and of course, you know, US is where a lot of innovation from a human resource practice perspective happens. But how have you seen sort of those practices playing up in markets across Asia? And I know you've traveled across Asia and you are in Singapore today. So I'd love to hear from your perspective if there are differences, similarities. What are you seeing?
Well, I wouldn't say, excuse me, I wouldn't say that all the innovation comes out of the United States by any means. I think there's a highly competitive business climate in the United States that creates a passion for rapid innovation in the HR profession in most industries in the US. But the US economy isn't growing nearly as fast as the economies in Asia. So companies in Asia are growing at a sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times the rate of the companies in the United States. So they're dealing with faster moving issues. The workforce is younger in Asia, more mobile, a little bit less established. So they're more likely to jump around than in the United States. Over here, the culture is very diverse. In the United States, we're a little bit getting away from diversity at the moment. So there's a more natural tendency towards diverse hiring. In terms of technology, I think generally most companies in HR believe that they're behind in technology and recruiting and in all different areas of HR. But that's because the human capital implementations and practices of technology are unique to each company. So even if you see a company like a Google or somebody that you think, oh, well, they really know how to do this, you can't copy what they do because they're Google and you're not Google, even if you took their tools and tried to use them. And I think because the companies here are growing faster and sometimes they're younger, they're more willing to experiment and try new things. They don't have as many old systems, they don't have as many established processes, so they can move a little bit faster. And I think there's, because and every country in Asia is a little bit different, but of course, generally speaking, the countries here are moving so fast. They're willing to make experiments and do new things that sometimes the American companies are not willing to do. So, there's a lot of differences.
Absolutely. And how does that play into sort of the gamut of the entire human resources practice, and particularly in the way that, the world is changing, the way of work is changing, the currency of work, from jobs and tasks is probably going to move to skills. And do you see any nuances that are slightly different, or if they're not yet?
Well, there's two. I mean, if you give me the opportunity to talk about the big picture, because I think that's kind of where you want me to go.
Yeah.
I think there's two huge trends that have happened maybe over the last 50 years, and they're happening in Asia maybe faster than anywhere else. The first is the decoupling of a worker from their employer.
Right.
When I went into the workforce in the 70s, you pretty much planned your career around your employer. You assumed you were going to be with the same employer most of your career. And if you moved around a few times during your career, that was okay. But if you moved around more than a few times, it was considered to be negative. Little by little, for many reasons over the last 4 or 5 decades, that relationship has changed, where the employers see the workers as replaceable parts in a sense. I don't mean that in a negative way, but they know they're going to leave and they're going to have to get new ones.
Right.
The job market's very transparent. You can go on the internet and find jobs in an instant and apply with one click. Couldn't do that 40, 50 years ago. And young people define their career as a series of learning experiences, not as one career in one company or even in one industry.
Right.
And of course, the rate of change of industries and of jobs and careers and job families has changed. So even if you're a software engineer, what you did 10 years ago is vastly different from what you're doing today because the technology's changed there. So that's number one. So that means for employers, having a great brand, really being clear on who you want to attract, trying to find a way to get people to hang around and engage with your company, and really focusing on fit, because there's going to be a lot of people in the job market coming and going, especially in Asia. The second part of this is tech.
Right.
When I got into HR stuff, the technology was mostly systems of record. There wasn't that much innovation in the technology. You had an HR system, you had an ATS, you had a payroll system, you had a learning management system, and you could debate about which vendor you had, but they didn't do that much other than store records and do, sort of compliance stuff. Now you can buy an AI video interviewer that's, can interview 100 people at the same time with a very high degree of precision and industrial psychology built into the AI. And somebody else might do it a different way.
Right.
So the technology value add in human capital is extraordinarily high compared to what it used to be. So every company is saying, well, what tech innovation or AI can I use to make my recruiting, my retention, my engagement, my training, my career development better? And that means there's 1,000 vendors, startups, VC firms plowing money into this. So it's a very technology heavy place right now. It didn't used to be that way.
Absolutely. And we can see that, and you're 100% correct in terms of, the pace of change. Even in my career of 25 years, it's massive right now, and it feels quite unprecedented. There are so many technologies out there, Josh, but at AMS we always talk about solving a client's business problem,
Right.
and really focusing on business outcomes for a client, given the work, the work of the way we work in talent. And I know you're very passionate about this. I think I've borrowed your piece on what is the problem that you're trying to solve. I'd love to hear from you a little bit more on that piece, and how do you think that organizations, HR practitioners rather, should look at it?
Well, yeah, let me say something that I think will actually help people make sense of this chaos that's going on in the tech. There have been periods of time, probably during the cloud era and now during the AI era, where we got somehow hypnotized into the belief that if we bought the right technology, amazing things would happen. And so the goal became the technology. And then we said, well, if the goal is the technology, let's figure out what the ROI of the technology is. That is completely backwards. There's always interesting technology. Now it's AI. It used to be cloud. 5 years ago, from now it'll be something else, and we'll come up with a name for that. And your job in HR is to help the company grow, to help the company improve its products and services, time to market, whatever it may be. AI, cloud, AI interviews, whatever it is, are tools to help you do that. So just as you said, if you fall in love with the problem, and I mean the business problem, the problem is not AI implementation. AI is the tool to help you solve the problem of hiring more salespeople or improving leadership capabilities or speeding up time to market or whatever it may be, then you're going to be focused on technology in the right way, and you're going to be able to evaluate it, because you'll just say, based on this set of problems, does this set of technology or tools or vendors help me do that? As opposed to, let's get involved in this big implementation and see if we can get an ROI out of this wonderful thing that we just bought. That's actually the backwards way to do this. And you guys know this, so you talk about it all the time. But the technology providers are really good at making people believe that the goal is the technology. It's not. The technology is the tool to help you do something else. And I think this is going to be like this forever. I think this is unfortunately just the hypnotic effect of new technology.
Right. If I was to double click on that, Josh, could you talk about any particular business problems that technology has been able to solve? And also in the same breath, some business problems that technology cannot solve.
Well, and let's just talk about talent acquisition, since that's
Right.
most of what we're here for.
Right.
So let's look at talent intelligence and skills inference stuff. Okay, so maybe 10 years ago, if you wanted to find a rarefied, person with very specialized skills, you could try to look around on LinkedIn. You probably would have a hard time finding them, but you're probably going to find a recruiter or a headhunter or a firm like yours that knows that domain, knows who those people are, knows where they are,
Right.
and can find them. Along comes AI, and companies like Eightfold and other ones, and before ChatGPT, found out that if they applied AI to all this data about people on the internet, they could do a pretty good job of figuring out who has very unique technical skills in a way that the general recruiter wouldn't know. A specialized recruiter might, but a general recruiter wouldn't know. So all of a sudden, in a period of a couple of years, everybody wanted to buy this AI inference, skills inference, talent intelligence stuff. And most of the companies then said to themselves, well, we need a skills taxonomy. And we would say to them, no, you don't. You need to focus on the problem of who you're trying to hire and then worry about the skills later. But it did really transform the world of sourcing. Now you fast forward to where we are today, that technology is available for $20 a month from ChatGPT instead of $200,000 a year from a big AI company. So that problem suddenly became sort of a commodity
Right.
offering, and so the next set of problems comes along. So this is the way it works, is some of these things are extraordinarily high value in the early stages, and then they become commoditized later. Video interviewing is another one. When video interviewing started a long time ago by HireVue and a bunch of other pioneers in this, people were really freaked out. You remember, they were really freaked out about it. They were worried about the bias. They were going to get sued. Nobody wanted to, they didn't know where their videos were going, who's watching these things, what is the AI doing. There was a lot of lawsuits about African American faces versus Asian faces versus women versus men. Is it going to differentiate between people correctly or not? That's become mainstream now too. So there's a bunch of things like that that have come along that have added a tremendous amount of value and then later became sort of commoditized into the space.
Yeah, I was with one of the APAC CHROs yesterday, and she mentioned she's very tech focused. They've built in technology into their HR suite, but as it relates to the work that we do with them currently, for example, we are at amazing hiring manager scores. We are doing direct sourcing to the tune of 95%, and and that includes, of course, referrals and internals.
Yeah.
But agency usage is
Amazing.
really down.
Yeah.
We're going and finding niche talents. She was really asking me, Roop, I love that we want to talk about AI. Our CEO wants to, really have us implement AI, but exactly as you said, I'm not sure that we have a problem to solve. The one problem that banks do need to think about and solve is how do they ensure that their regulatory compliances, for example, are on time? And I think that's probably such a simple thing.
Well,
that
that's a
technology
good
can
application
solve.
of AI that doesn't sound as strategic as you thought it was, but actually it's really important.
Important, correct.
Yeah, Yeah, that's exactly true. Now, to an example of something that hasn't worked out, you asked me earlier. Here's something that I think has turned out to be a little bit of a frustration for most people. Once this AI skills inference started for recruiting, there was a huge wave of companies saying, well, let's build a corporate-wide skills taxonomy.
Right.
Since we're going to do it for recruiting, let's do it for everything. And they would spend weeks and months and years trying to come up with this naming scheme for all of these quote-unquote skills, and how big is the skill, how small is the skill, where do we get the data, to fill the data about the skill. I would say most of the projects that moved into directions of corporate skills taxonomies for the sake of the skills taxonomy failed or got canceled, or the companies won't admit that they wasted a lot of time. So sometimes these technology ideas play out into great value, and sometimes they just turn into big tech projects that stop.
Right, right. I know you talk about 2026 being the start of AI in enterprises. I'd love to sort of, you to talk a little bit more about how you see that playing out.
Well, the big story there, and I know we don't have a lot of time, is moving from AI as an individual performance or productivity tool to AI as a workflow improvement or business improvement tool. And the analogy is the driverless car. We spent 30, 40 years building tools to make the driver's experience better, when the actual goal of the car is to take care of the passengers, to move them from point A to point B. And so now that we've had that experience building all these driver assist things, driver power steering and all the other things that have come along, the industry has reached the point where we can say, what if we had a car with no driver, and we focused on the safety and the effectiveness and the efficiency of getting from place to place, and we have cars that are 100 times safer than we ever could have accomplished with driver assist features. Same thing's true in HR. Maybe the interview scheduler job never should have existed, for example.
Right.
Maybe the sourcer job doesn't need to exist anymore. Maybe the screening job doesn't need to exist anymore. In the context of an entire workflow of getting somebody into the company, getting the right person into the right job, we should rethink the steps that it took to get there. And that's really where we think enterprise AI is going.
Right. And do you think the HR fraternity is ready for it?
No, but I think they're dealing with that. I think they're getting the message. I mean, the reason they're getting the message is companies are not hiring HR people. They don't want to staff up when they see them spending a bunch of money on AI. They're getting pressure from above, and nobody likes their job going away. But I think companies are very, very familiar with this issue that if we don't redeploy people into these new roles, we're going to fall behind anyway. So, yeah, I think it's hitting.
Great, thank you. Just to summarize our discussion, definitely we need technology is here to stay. It's how we use it to solve a business problem or to improve a business outcome is where, as HR folks, we need to think about. Definitely.
And by the way, business outcome, not HR outcome.
Yes.
Meaning growth or time to market, not time to hire.
Absolutely. So it's all about, productivity, getting
Right.
people quicker and doing more sales.
Right.
Ultimately. Thank you, Josh. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.